My father raised his glass and smiled at everyone sitting around the table. Then he looked directly at me. Some people, he said loudly, never become anything in life. They just marry someone successful and pretend they earned it. The table went silent. My face burned. I knew exactly who he meant. Me. My name is Claire, and that night was supposed to be a celebration. My father, Richard, had invited our entire family to an expensive restaurant to celebrate his upcoming retirement. My husband, Daniel, sat beside me. Under the table, he gently touched my hand. He knew my father was trying to humiliate me. But I forced a small smile. I had spent years trying to earn my father's approval. Years listening to him compare me with my younger brother, Jason. Jason was the smart one. Jason was the successful one. Jason was the son who made our family proud. And according to my father, I was simply the daughter who had married well. He conveniently forgot that I had worked for years before marrying Daniel. He forgot that I had helped Daniel build his business when it was nothing more than a tiny office and a few clients. That night, my father wanted everyone to forget it too. He raised his glass again. To Jason, he announced. At least one of my children knows how to build a future. Jason gave an uncomfortable laugh. My mother stared at her plate. Then my father leaned toward me. Claire, don't take it personally. Some people simply aren't capable of achieving much. I felt something inside me crack. But before I could respond, Daniel slowly placed his glass on the table. He looked at my father. Richard, he said calmly, are you sure you want to keep talking about achievement? My father's smile disappeared. What is that supposed to mean? Daniel reached inside his jacket. He pulled out a thick folder. My heart suddenly started pounding. Daniel placed it on the table. I think everyone here deserves to know what you've actually been doing with the money you claim you've earned. My father stared at the folder. And for the first time that evening, he looked afraid. I turned toward my husband. Daniel, what is this? He looked at me. Something your father hoped you'd never find out. And suddenly, I realized this dinner wasn't really about my father's retirement. It was about a secret he had been hiding from me for years. My father had always presented himself as a respectable businessman. For nearly 30 years, he had owned a construction company. Whenever people asked about him, he proudly said he had built everything himself. He loved telling stories about sacrifice, hard work, success. But there was another side to my father. One I had slowly started noticing. A few years earlier, my parents began having financial problems. My mother once told me they were struggling because Dad had made several bad investments. Then, strangely, everything changed. They bought a new car, renovated their kitchen, started taking expensive vacations. My father even began wearing a watch that probably cost more than my first car. Whenever I asked where the money came from, he always gave me the same answer. Business. I never pushed further. I trusted him. That was my mistake. Months before the retirement dinner, Daniel came home from work one evening looking unusually serious. Claire, he asked, has your father ever asked you to sign documents for his company? I immediately remembered the papers. Yes. What kind? I don't know. He said they were routine business documents. Daniel stared at me. Did you read them? I shook my head. No. Why? He remained silent for several seconds. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. Don't sign anything else your father gives you. Daniel, what's going on? I think your father has been lying to you. I wanted to believe he was wrong. But at dinner, when Daniel opened that folder, everything suddenly made sense. He pulled out copies of financial records. Your father's company has been transferring money into accounts connected to Jason. My brother's face went pale. What? My father immediately stood up. That is enough. Daniel didn't even blink. No. I think we've had enough lies. Then he turned toward me. Claire, your name appears on several of these documents. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Daniel showed me a page. There was my signature. My hands began shaking. My father quickly said, "You knew what you were signing." I stared at him. No, Dad. You told me those papers were routine. He said nothing. That silence told me more than any explanation could. Daniel continued. These documents make it look like Claire had a financial role in the company. I looked at my father in disbelief. Suddenly, all those years of him calling me irresponsible felt different. He had been secretly using my name while telling everyone I wasn't capable of handling anything. But then Daniel revealed something even worse. If the company ever faces serious financial trouble, he said, Claire could be pulled into the mess. I looked at my father. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at the man I trusted. I was looking at someone who had been using my trust against me. I turned toward my brother. Jason, I whispered, did you know? Jason looked at our father. Then he looked at me. His silence was enough. Jason, I said again. Finally, he lowered his head. I knew Dad was moving money around. My chest tightened. How long? He swallowed. About 2 years. 2 years. My own brother had known. My father had spent years making me feel like the disappointment of the family while secretly using my name to protect himself. And Jason had watched it happen. My father tried to interrupt. Claire, you're misunderstanding everything. I laughed bitterly. Am I? Daniel opened another document. This is a message from Richard to his accountant. My father froze. The message showed that he had been discussing ways to shift certain company obligations away from himself and toward documents connected to me. Suddenly, I understood. My father had been protecting Jason while making sure I carried the risk. I wanted to scream. I wanted to expose everything right there. But Daniel quietly touched my hand. Don't fight him emotionally, he whispered. Fight him with facts. So that's what we did. The next morning, I contacted an attorney. We collected everything. Old emails. Financial records. Business documents. Every paper my father had ever asked me to sign. And the more we investigated, the worse it became. My father had created a complicated financial arrangement involving his company, Jason, and documents connected to me. Then I sent my father one message. Dad, I know everything. We need to talk. His answer came almost immediately. Claire, don't do anything stupid. I stared at the screen. After everything he had done, he still thought I was the problem. So I typed. For once, I'm doing something smart. Then I stopped responding. 2 weeks later, my father asked me to meet him privately. When I arrived, he wasn't angry. He was nervous. That alone told me how serious this was. Claire, he said, families make mistakes. I stared at him. You didn't make a mistake, Dad. You made a choice. He looked away. Then he offered me money. A large amount. Take it, he said. And we forget all of this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're trying to pay me to stay quiet? No. I'm trying to make things right. No, I replied. You're trying to make the problem disappear. His expression hardened. You're destroying this family. I stood. No, Dad. I placed a folder on his table. You did that the moment you decided my name was more valuable than my trust. He opened the folder. Inside was a formal notice from my attorney. His face went pale. You wouldn't. I looked directly at him. I already did. For the first time in my life, my father had no control over what happened next. The truth didn't stay hidden for long. My father's business records were reviewed. People who had trusted him for years started asking questions. Family members learned what he had done. Business partners wanted explanations. And the perfect image my father had built over decades began falling apart. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't want his company destroyed. I didn't want to humiliate him the way he had humiliated me. I simply wanted the truth. My brother eventually admitted that he had known far more than he first revealed. That betrayal hurt almost as much as my father's. Then came the biggest shock. My mother left my father. Not because of money. Because she finally understood how long he had been lying to everyone. For the first time, my father was facing the consequences of his own choices. Months passed. Then one evening, my phone rang. It was Dad. I almost ignored the call. But I answered. "Claire," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." I said nothing. "I was wrong about you." Those were the words I had spent my childhood waiting to hear. But strangely, they didn't feel as powerful anymore. I asked him one question. "Why did you always think I wasn't enough?" There was a long silence. Then he finally answered. "Because I thought you would always need me." I closed my eyes. And suddenly, everything made sense. My father hadn't been trying to make me stronger. He had been trying to keep control over me. As long as I needed his approval, he could make me feel small. But once I stopped needing it, he lost his power. "I forgive you," I told him. He sounded surprised. "Really?" "Yes." I paused. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I trust you again." Then I ended the call. Daniel was waiting nearby. He didn't ask what my father had said. He simply took my hand. And I realized something important. I hadn't won because my father lost. I had won because I finally stopped measuring my worth by his opinion. For years, I thought revenge meant making someone hurt the way they hurt you. I was wrong. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to carry the shame someone placed on your shoulders. My father tried to convince everyone that I was weak. That I had achieved nothing. That my husband was the reason I had a good life. But when the truth came out, I understood something. He had never been judging my worth. He had been protecting his own ego. And Daniel hadn't saved me. He had simply stood beside me while I learned to save myself. That dinner started with my father raising a glass to humiliate me. But it ended with his carefully built image collapsing. And the greatest lesson I learned was this. Never let someone who benefits from your silence convince you that speaking the truth is betrayal. Sometimes walking away is justice. Sometimes exposing the truth is justice. And sometimes, the best revenge is becoming so confident in your own worth that the person who tried to destroy it no longer has any power over you.